Hey there, on today's episode of Tactic Talks, I am joined by Jessie from Fury's Finest and Patrick from 3D Wargamer to talk a little bit more about tactic cards and how they can best be used, and which ones to even take depending on your roster. Now, before we get too far into it, this is a fair warning, disclaimer, call it whatever you want, that this series of videos is not necessarily for somebody who's brand new to Marvel Crisis Protocol. We're going to be talking about cards and characters without ever actually reading off their full abilities or anything like that, just to keep the conversation going and faster paced. However, we do still offer some not quite meta game tactic talk and stuff. We're offering tips and strategies and stuff like that, but nothing along the lines of, if you always want to win, make sure to bring X, or if you want to make sure to lose, bring Y kind of a thing. With all that being said, my name is Nate, and welcome to the Gamers Guild. Hello there, and welcome to the show that probably should have been a podcast, Tuesday Tactic Talks. On today's episode, we are talking about Marvel Crisis Protocol, and we'll be taking a closer look at team tactic cards. Joining me for this, I have Jessie from Fury's Finest, a podcast that strikes a really nice balance between talking about characters in the game, but also about their lore.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk tactic cards today because I think this is a part of the game we can all improve on and all learn more about, myself included, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Absolutely. I usually don't get through all 5 of mine, which feels bad. And
Right.
then also
It does.
Also, we have Patrick from 3D Wargamer. Patrick has been making several different STLs for accessories like victory point trackers, as well as stamina and power trackers for your characters that I've really begun enjoying in my games.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate that. Yeah, tactics cards are great because they change up this game. Every time you play it, it can be even the same scenario can be different just from using different tactic cards.
Absolutely. All right, so how I like to start the show off is just to give an idea of people, other people out there, what we are playing. Is if you were going to a 3-round event tomorrow, what characters and cards are making your roster? And I do want to give a disclaimer, while this video is coming out after Thor and all of them have released, I have not included those because at this point I do not have Thor or any of them, and I don't have any experience with them. But for me, I would bring Captain America, Captain Marvel, Black Panther, Black Widow, Baron Zemo, Killmonger, Venom, Hulk, Red Skull, and MODOK. The team tactic cards for me right now that are just huge are Patch Up, Trip Up, Avengers Assemble, Cosmic Invigoration, Usurp the Throne, Lethal Defender, Brace for Impact, and Disarm. And the crisis cards I'm bringing are the Cosmic Cubes, the Spider-Infected Wakandan Herbs for the Extraction ones, and then the Extremist Consoles, Gamma Waves, Infinity Formula for the secure ones. Overall, the idea of this list is having as many points able to be scored as possible. I want the games to be over quickly. I don't have a super aggressive list typically when I'm running the Avengers with Captain America. I just want to be scoring those points as quickly as I can. And for the secure objectives, I want to have a back row. That way I can have characters like Black Widow take those. I have characters with Captain Marvel with a longer range where they can be scoring on the back. But that's just for me. Jessie, what about you? What would you bring to an event?
Oh man, this is a really hard thing right now, and I'm so glad you limited us not having the Asgardians and stuff, which is perfect because this is what's actually out in the game. But I kind of went half and half Cabal and Avengers on my list, similar to yours. So my list is Captain America, Black Panther, Iron Man, Black Widow. Then we have Red Skull, Zemo, Killmonger, Ultron. And then, of course, to round our list out, we have 2 non-affiliated characters with these factions. We have Shuri and Venom. And I just really like this spread of characters. I've been playing a lot of Hulk since the game came out, and I've even talked on the show how much I love Hulk. This is my first foray into pulling away from the Hulk, trying it out. And I think this is potentially a more malleable list because I can kind of build different ways, and, you know, I have more freedom now that I don't have the Hulk and this type of stuff. On top of that, my tactics cards are Usurp the Throne, of course, Age of Ultron, Cosmic Invigoration. Those are the bad guy related cards. Then we have Mission Objective, Smash, Avengers Assemble, Patch Up. I always take Patch Up. And then we also have Lethal Protector. So we have the unaffiliated Venom who can kind of now get some play in both of these lists if I switch from Cabal to Avengers. And then last but not least, my Secure and Extracts. We have Riot, Spark over Extremis, Infinity Formula Goes Missing, and Deadly Meteors for the Secure. And then for Extract, we have the Spider Infected, Invade Manhattan, Struggle for the Cube, and the Mystic Wakandan Herbs. And these all just similar to your list, I guess, Nate, but a little bit different. Some of these just focus on fighting in particular areas, but also I can inversely flip this and I can go mainly to these wide objectives, as I call them, where there's a lot of things on the map to grab. And I think my list does well at that because I have things like Zemo and Black Panther and Black Widow and these type of characters that are really good objective runners. So you can kind of mix it up.
Absolutely, and I see that you also avoided the scroll infiltration as well as the Kree power core, which are just very, very slow scoring objectives at the end of the day.
Yeah, and sometimes they have some variability that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, at least with this particular list. So
that's fair. Yeah, Patrick, what about you, man? What are you running?
Excellent. Well, I'm more of a thematic player than a competitive player, although I try to play my characters. Everybody likes to win. So I try to play them in their roles. But I'm running mainly an Avengers list because they're my favorite. So right now I've got Captain America, of course, Captain Marvel, Venom, Spider-Man, Black Panther, Iron Man, Black Widow, Okoye, Killmonger, and Hulk. I got my core Avengers there, and then I've got a few others to kind of help them out where they might be lacking a little bit. On my tactics cards, I'm seeing a very similar theme. We've got very similar core tactics cards, I think, because they're just very good cards. I got Patch Up, Seeing Red, Second Wind, Mission Objective, probably my favorite card in the game, Gamma Launch, Usurp the Throne, Sucker, and Lethal Protector. For my missions, I haven't tried every mission yet. I've tried most of them. These I picked mainly because I have the most fun with them. They may not be the best in a competitive scene, but Gamma Wave sweeps across the Midwest, Infinity Formula Goes Missing, and Riot's Spark over Extremis 3.0. I got Spider Infected Invade Manhattan, Alien Ship Crashes Downtown, and then I actually picked Skulls Infiltrate the World Leadership. It's a weird mission, but I've had a lot of fun with that one, where sometimes they show up turn 6, and then sometimes they show up turn 1. You never know what's going to happen with it, so I enjoy that one.
Yeah, no, fair enough, man. There are definitely situations where I love the single extraction objectives, and you just load that up on a Bodok or a Hulk, and you're just able to run around with it the rest of the game. But so I completely understand. But getting straight into what we're talking about today, we're going to be taking that deeper dive into tactic cards. And so my first question for you guys is, what are the things you're trying to keep in mind when you're selecting your 8 tactic cards that make the cut into your roster? Because we have well over 20 of these different cards at this point. Patrick, what does that process look like for you?
Well, for me, I'm basically trying to make up for the drawbacks of my characters. I've got basing myself with the Avengers. I'm not really playing like the absolute best. If I was, I'd probably be running Zemo in every list, for example. So there's certain things that are universally good, and then there's other things that I try to make up for. Mission objectives are a really good one. Things like that are just universally good. Healing. Activation economy is really big for me. Of course, in this game, it's huge. 2 actions, and then you're alternating. So anything that lets you get more actions or lets you free up an action, that's a really big deal too. So when I'm looking at that, that's, how can I make up for my characters? What will give me more activation economy? And then after that is what's just universally good all the time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Jesse, what about you?
Oh, man, I would say a similar approach to what Patrick's talking about, but I think with my list, since I literally went 4 Cabal, 4 Avengers, and 2 unaffiliated heroes, that was my starting point for choosing my cards. So I made sure not to choose too much Avengers or too much Cabal. I actually just chose one of each of those. And there are some unaffiliated cards. Of course, we have like Usurp the Throne, which is a phenomenal card. But, at this point, we can use that in either list, right? If Killmonger is with the Avengers or the Cabal. So I basically just tried to keep where this deck could play either part of the list or any sort of mix of these characters without getting too crazy. And of course, we've got just some of the standard cards we talked about, like Patch Up and Smash. and mission objective. I think these are just cards that are going to fit anytime you make a list from your 10 models. And I just think they're always good. So you're not really put in a mental bind there. Like, I'm probably going to choose those. Let's move on to what other cards we're going to choose. And once again, this game is just so tough. The tactic cards are so rich, and it's such a huge part of the game that I feel like everyone hasn't fully explored yet. So I'm excited to learn more. But my biggest thought was just not to go too hard into maybe, one affiliation or something, since my list is a straight split.
Yeah, absolutely. There's only so much you can lean when you're trying to be able to switch back and forth between those affiliations.
Right. Yeah, and cards like Lethal Protector, for instance, I can fit in either, right? Because Venom is going to be unaffiliated, and he's going to be popping back and forth between both sides. So.
Yeah, and same as Usurp the Throne. As long as it's got that unaffiliated, there's a little bit more versatility built into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For myself, I want to be able to make sure my tactic cards are able to make it to different boards. So for me, if I ever see a lot of throwable terrain out, Brace for Impact is one of those that's just going to make it into the roster. But if there's a lot more like size 4, size 5 terrain, or a lot of size 1 terrain, it's not always as necessary. So Brace for Impact might be left on the table. But otherwise, I usually try to build my set of characters first and then go from there. So
certainly.
I know that I went a lot more heavy on the Avengers side, so I wanted to make sure I have Avengers assemble. Honestly, at this point, Cosmic Invigoration is there for a one-trick pony that I use when there's a objective setup of Gamma Waves and one of those one extraction objectives, and I just run Hulk, MODOK, and Red Skull and have a Wrecking Ball at 15 threat.
It'd be
That's
fun.
Crazy. Yeah.
It's you know what? I've gone 3-0 with it. It seems kind of janky at first, but it turns out it's actually pretty fun to play with.
Yeah, I was about to ask. I saw the Hulk and MODOK in your list, and I was interested what their role played, because it seemed like the rest of your list was defensive and objective based, and you had these two of the heaviest hitters in the game, and I was interested. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, no, it's a crazy little like it has to be this perfect setup, and I think as soon as Thor and Loki come out, I can no longer count on getting these perfect setups and justifying slots for it. But in the meantime, it's been a lot of fun to run.
Oh yeah.
Cool. So the second question I have is we just talked about our rosters not too long ago. So if you guys don't mind, real quick, why did you choose the 8 cards you mentioned that you would bring to an event?
Well, this kind of goes with my first question too. I wanted cards that were versatile, but I also wanted cards that had power spikes. So I've heard a couple cards mentioned on this episode so far with us. Usurp the Throne, Lethal Protector, Cosmic Invigoration, Avengers Assemble. These are cards that we're all talking about. I think these are power cards in the game, These are cards that can flip a game in certain ways, or they can keep you in a game in certain ways. So I think for me, those were kind of baseline cards, and then I picked cards for flavor. I'm a big thematic player myself, hence why our show focuses on lore so much. But I mean, even cards like the Age of Ultron, if anything, it's a card in your hand that's a complete deterrent, and it gives you new play styles to even play with Ultron. On top of that, we talked about already, I'm beating a dead horse here, but Patch Up is just good at any moment. And, I like these power cards that can flip the game mixed with these kind of standard baseline cards that can fit anywhere. And I think that's a good balance for me personally.
Absolutely. For me, very similar. I love Venom. He's one of my favorite characters, so I had to get Lethal Protector. And the combination with that and so many snacks is just so much fun to play around with. As long as Killmonger is in my roster, I will be taking Usurp the Throne, because a card that gets you an extra dice on the attack is already big enough as it is, but the chance to score victory points is something that I think is heavily understated and is absolutely worth taking for that. Avengers Assemble and Cosmic Invigoration, if you're running with those affiliations, you're going to run those cards. If you're running Wakanda, you're going to run Wakanda forever.
Oh, absolutely.
My other 4 slots, though, Trip Up, Patch Up are 2 cards that I will almost always take. Trip Up is a great way to hand out the Stun and Stagger, especially to the bigger threats like MODOK, like Hulk, that really rely on their activation economy. Patch Up, as we've, again, just beating this poor horse that it'll need Patch Up. Is huge. And then Disarm is a card that's a little bit more flexible for me. It doesn't always make it. It usually gets cut for the character specific abilities, but the ability to just be like, hey, your Modoc's only going to be is rolling 2 less dice for this turn means that he's not getting as much power back. He's not going to be dealing as much damage is always really nice. And the fact that you only have to spend 1 and there's the range of 3, so there's more versatility built into it. And again, brace for impact. If there's things just being hurled around on the board, or your opponent has Hulk or soon to be coming out Thor that are chucking size 4 pieces of terrain, it's just a really annoying card for your opponent to have to deal with. So those are the ones for me, at least. Patrick, what about your 8?
Well, mine are related to what I said on the first question. I'm looking at action economy and free actions, and then universally good. So my action economy ones are basically Gamma Launch and Lethal Protector. Anything that equates to free movement is likely to free up a move action, so I don't have to take an extra action doing a move. I can focus on that double attack, especially if I've got Hulk in my list. You always want him and Venom double attacking. Related to more action economy, I've got Seeing Red, which basically gives you a free attack. And then Second Wind, it's not really apparent at first, but if you're playing the Hulk, that's really good to get rid of that stun, and then Hulk can focus on using 2 attacks to do what he needs to do instead of wasting 1 to get rid of that stun, because you definitely want to stun on an enemy Hulk for sure. Another one, Aiding, there's a reason we all took Patch Up. It's just universally good. Sucker, that's a good card. It helps prevent a key trigger, so it takes away power from an opponent. So if you got a key trigger, like they're keying up to do a binary form or an Ultron Resurrect, then if you can take that power away and prevent that from happening, it might be a key card at a key moment. It's very specific to something like that, but it may just make the difference there. Mission Objective is another just universally good one for keeping those victory points. And then Usurp the Throne, I think, is a fun one. Like you said, a couple of VP is very powerful. You got to manage to pull it off. But if you're playing Killmonger, it's probably worth it just to try and get a couple VP. And the extra attack dice never hurt.
No, they never do. And I will say real quick, Sucker is one I personally have underrated. The ability to be building up a Unibeam with Friday Eye on Iron Man and have that just wiped away all of a sudden has made me feel very sad a couple of times.
Yep. It's if I see my opponent has an Ultron, I'm probably including that one.
Understandably so.
There's almost too many good tactic cards. I feel like the conclusion I'm coming to when we're all talking about these, because there are some overlaps, but there's so many I want too. I can't afford in this list,
Absolutely. And again, just compliments to the guys out at AMG for fantastic decision making. That they're forcing us to make decisions, and before we even come to the table, and then once we're at the table, we even have to make more decisions, and it just makes for a really fun experience.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, they're nailing it. Yep.
All right, cool. 2 questions left. Try to make this a little bit quicker than some other things out there. What is the maximum number of team tactic cards that you would bring in a roster that require an affiliation or a specific character? For me, I've already answered this question in a previous episode. For me, it's 3 to an absolute maximum of 4. But I want to hear your guys' thoughts and reasonings. Patrick, why don't you take this one first?
So mine is very similar. I don't look at it as those. I look at it as what I want for a base. I want 5 good base cards that are kind of universal. So 3 is the maximum number. I can change out 3 pretty easily. I'm running mainly Avengers, so my universal cards are pretty good, but I've got the 3 for if I run Venom or if I run Hulk or if I run Killmonger. So that's pretty simple for me.
Absolutely. Jesse, what about for you, man?
I think I'm falling in the same boat as you guys, but this is an interesting question because you could really break this up into 2 sections. And I think I've alluded to this in my earlier question, but it's like affiliation or characters, This is getting really interesting because I have usurped the throne, but of course it's unaffiliated. So Killmonger could fight with the Avengers or he could fight with the Cabal on my list. Conversely, we have Cosmic Invigoration, which is Cabal only, and Avengers Assemble, which is Avengers only. So I think my first answer is the most I would take if you're playing 2 factions, 2 teams on your list. I would take 1 of each card, probably for the teams, and that's it, because we know we're going to get more team cards in the future, probably for these core factions. But then it gets interesting. It's like, how many of these individual character cards do you play? You know, do we all have mentioned Lethal Protector, but you know, Venom's kind of popping around in whatever list he wants to be in, right? So I think probably 3 to 4 is the max as well, but I definitely think the affiliation number is equal to the number of affiliations you have. I don't think you exceed that, if that makes sense. So I just think you're getting into a slippery slope there where say you were playing Cabal and Avengers and you went like 2 Cabal cards and 2 Avengers cards. I think that's just getting too much, you know, because then you're really hurting your hand when you only play that particular faction.
I can, yeah, completely agree with the asterisk, caveat, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
That if you are only running one affiliation, if you're just all in on the Cabal, I see very little reason to not be able to take both Dark Reign and Cosmic Invigoration.
Absolutely.
However, with so many, what I'm calling them splashable affiliations with like Wakanda and Asgard that are on both affiliations anyway, I can definitely see where you don't want too many of just Wakandan affiliated cards or something like that.
Yeah, and what a fantastic question to return to in the future when we have characters like the Winter Soldier, who literally is Wakandan, Cabal, and Avengers. I think this is going to get even more complicated than in a good way. You know, it's going to make really interesting list building.
Absolutely. Very excited for the release of Winter Soldier, and something that one of my friends in a local group is kind of down on him because, yes, he's going to be able to count for that, but then he's not going to be able to use Avengers Assemble. He's not going to be able to use Wakanda Forever. So you're able to get the affiliation, but then you kind of lose some of the benefits of the cards that you could bring with it.
It's a good point. Yeah, he'll give a lot more flexibility with your roster. Well, we'll have more flexibility than ever with your roster, but you're right. You are taking a hit with those tactic cards. Interesting.
All right. My last question for you guys this evening is: when you are narrowing down your 8 tactic cards to 5 for a game, what things are you looking at? Let's go with Jessie on this one.
Well, of course, we're going to look at your affiliation first. And I think it's pretty obvious if you're running 2 affiliations like I am today, you're going to want to cut the opposite affiliation cards if you had any. And, you know, you're probably going to have that one, like I said, you're going to have one for each. So that's already cut. So we're already reduced down, you know, to 7. So now you've got to really just look at who's in your list and maybe assess what the enemy player has and what would benefit you more. You guys were talking about cards like Sucker and things like that. Those are truly reactive cards when you're kind of in this pre-game list building, and I think that's probably their biggest strength. You see a particular character on the side of the board, and you say, I think I want that card, rather than, well, I'm playing Killmonger, so I'm going to do Usurp the Throne, you know? So that's where the generic cards truly shine, because then you can truly build it out in the best way possible. But my first choice would be remove the opposite affiliation if you have it, or maybe even cut one of your own affiliation cards if you are going that mono affiliation, and then just kind of fill out the rest of your list with the character specific cards that are in your list, and then of course the generic cards that fit what you're about to play.
Absolutely. Patrick, what are your thoughts?
Well, like I talked a little bit about earlier, I try to run my core 5, and then I'll definitely swap in the individual characters like Venom's Lethal Protector. Venom's pretty much an auto-include for me, so he's my favorite character, so I'm almost always running his in there. I usually take out Sucker to put Lethal Protector in there, and then I got my main ones: Patch Up, Mission Objective, Seeing Red, Second Wind. Those are all just kind of generic Avengers. Because I run the single affiliation, it's, you know, not too big a deal to narrow out another affiliation. I don't really run more than 1 or 2 non-affiliated characters. Obviously, you can't keep that affiliation. I like all the Avengers the most anyway, so I'm pretty much running an Avengers team with a Venom or an Avengers team with a Killmonger. I kind of keep my core 5, and then I'll swap in that Venom card or that Killmonger card if they're in my list. I'll take out probably Sucker or Second Wind to kind of sacrifice those for the little bit better specific cards.
I love hearing the different ways that you guys are thinking through this. I am similar to both of you a little bit. I start out with my core 2, which is that patch up, trip up that I feel like will be good in just about every single game. I'll then take one of the affiliation specific cards to fill in, and then I look at the board state And I'm like, okay, cool. My opponent's got Hulk. I definitely need you to have usurp the throne, so I need to make sure I have Killmonger to knock Hulk out as quick as I can, and kind of with that maybe bring in Brace for Impact. And so I try to leave those last two cards to look at how the terrain is set up. If I have drop off in my 8, look and see if there's a lot of larger buildings that flying characters moving around other pieces would be useful. And I think it's important to be able to keep that flexibility, but love the different thoughts. And again, thank you guys for joining me today. Do you have any other thoughts you guys would like to share?
I guess my final thought with these tactic cards is I just don't think we realize how deep this game is in these tactic cards. This episode is proof of that because you guys were both running Avengers-centric lists, especially Patrick, pure mono Avengers, and, you know, Nate, you're running mainly Avengers, and I'm going half and half. And, you know, that's the first step is building your roster. But then, like, that completely dictates the way you choose your tactic cards because I think if I was going more mono Avengers, I would be choosing tactic cards more like Patrick is. You know what I mean? So this is where it gets really interesting. What affects what dominoes into what, and that's where the roster is so interesting even before this, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Just by taking some of those Cabal cards, which are so great when you're running the Cabal, but you lose out on a little bit of that versatility.
yeah, absolutely. And like I said, Winter Soldier and stuff like that, they're going to blow the roster apart even more wide open in the future. And, you know, we're going to get really crazy. But I'm still learning about tactic cards, guys. I feel like this is a very deep part of the game that I think everyone's explored the least. So I really appreciate you putting time into creating content on this, Nate.
Absolutely. Patrick, any final thoughts for us?
You guys hit it on the head. AMG is really knocking it out of the park with these tactic cards. Each character, I think their cards, they already feel thematic to the character. You know, Black Panther feels like Black Panther, Venom feels like Venom. And these are just another flavor to make a really cool thematic moment in the game. You know, Lethal Protector might come in at just the right moment, or that Usurp the Throne, like you said, taking down that Hulk, and it's just a really cool moment where something happens. It's really fun. You're laughing with your opponent, even if it was your guy that got killed. You're still having fun because it was a really neat moment that happened. It was like it's straight out of a comic book page, and that's part of the reason why I love this game. It's just really good that way. Like you said, getting new people in, or when you're doing demos, when they can slap that card down and do an Avengers card or something like that, and something really cool happens, they laugh, they have fun, and that's what this game's all about.
Absolutely. And I will mention real quick, one of the cards that we didn't mention are either of the team-up cards that we currently have access to in the Ricochet Blast and Unlikely Allies, I think is what it's called for the Venom and Spider-Man team-up, because it's a lot of commitment to make sure you have both of those characters on the field and all that kind of stuff. But it does make for those just truly comic book moments when you have Iron Man shooting his repulsor blast off of Cap's shield around the corner to hit somebody else is truly awesome.
Oh, it's amazing.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think those are a consideration in the mono affiliations like some of you guys were doing. But if you're split down the middle, you're right. You can't even think about it.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, I will not keep anybody here any longer. Real quick, Jesse, where can they find you?
Yeah, once again, thanks for having me on. And you can find Fury's Finest, my MCP podcast, weekly, anywhere you can find podcasts. So any of your podcatcher of choice. We also are on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Fury's Finest. And, you know, you also can reach out to me anytime, just like they did on Facebook. My name's Jessie Aiken. So it's JSSEEAKIN. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram at Jessie Aiken. And yeah, we just really like creating high quality, highly produced content for MCP because we're huge Marvel fans. We're huge thematic fans. And we're also huge gaming fans. So our goal essentially is to bridge the gap between everyone and bring them to this game. I don't want to go full like super heady Wargamer. I don't want to go, you know, super, you know, maybe casual, just pure MCU. We want to bridge all the gaps and bring as many people to this game, build up this community. So just check us out at Fury's Finest.
Absolutely. And Patrick, where can people find some of the cool stuff that you've created? I've actually got one of your power trackers in my hand, and I'm fiddling with it the entire time we've been recording.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it, Nate. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. So the place I post the most content is on Facebook. It's just 3D Wargamer. That's the number 3, letter D, and then Wargamer. I post pictures of the things I'm making. I do sell some stuff, but I try not to focus on that. I'm just trying to make cool content, create cool terrain tables, game aids. I've really been enjoying that lately. Like you said, making the trackers, turn counters. I'm making an Ultron raid trackers, make it a little bit easier instead of filling with tokens. So that's where most of my stuff is. They can also find me on Instagram at the 3D Wargamer. And if they wanted to email me for some reason, it's the 3D Wargamer at outlook.com.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you again for joining me. And as for everybody else, thanks for listening and keep on gaming.